So now that we have covered how to browse the Linux file system, I'm gonna show you how to install a web server. Before we actually do that, I'm gonna explain the concept of networking. If we type ifconfig in the terminal, which stands for interface configuration, if we type in ifconfig, we press enter, we can see our IP address. So our IP address, which is INET, and INET 6 stands for IP version 6, and INET is for IP version 4. So are there different types of IP addresses? And we are gonna explain about the IP version 4. If you see here INET, you can see your IP address, your NAT mask, and the broadcast address. I'm gonna explain what this is, but before I do, I'm gonna show you a concept which is called the OSI model. If we go to Wikipedia and type in OSI model, we can see that there are multiple layers inside the OSI model. The first layer, which is the physical layer, which stands for the physical hardware. So the actual electrical signals fall under the physical layer. A layer above that, we have the data link layer, which is the Ethernet layer. And that's the layer which in the switches operate. So everything can communicate with each other inside the same network just by using the data link layer. If we go back to our machine, we can see Ether, which is our MAC address. So the MAC address is a physical address which is unique on every network interface. So every network interface has its own MAC address. The first three, let's see, the MAC address. Let's go to Wikipedia and type in MAC address. So the MAC address is a 32-bit address. Which I am gonna explain what that is actually. Now the MAC address is a 30-bit address. I'm gonna explain what that is. It is represented in hexadecimal. So the reason why you see numbers and letters, these letters represent numbers. Our counting system is based on a base 10 counting system. So we have numbers from 0 to 9. But in hexadecimal, you have numbers representing from 0 to 15. So it represents in total 16 numbers, which is why it's hexadecimal, which is a base 16 number system. So the actual, if we go to Google and we Google base 16, you will get a Wikipedia page which is hexadecimal, and you can see the numbers, the letters represent numbers. Wait 1 minute if I can find something useful. So the letter A represents the number 10, the letter B represents the number 11, number C represents the number 12, and so forth. So that means that the number 10 in hexadecimal is actually number 16 and not number 10. The reason why hexadecimal is used is to save space, because when you're using base 10, basically if we say 255, which is 3 letters, and in hexadecimal it's FF. FF is the same as 255, which only requires 2 spaces. So it's more efficient to represent this in hexadecimal, so it's less tall. If you see the IPv6, it's also represented in hexadecimal, but the IPv4 is represented in base 10. So that is our counting system. No, and I forgot to mention the reason it's base 16 and not base 25 or whatever is because 16 fits perfectly with the amounts of bits. So 8 bits can represent 255 characters, which is perfect for hexadecimal because FF is 255. And that's the reason why hexadecimal is used. That is what I'm going to explain for the MAC address tables for now. If we go back to our OSI model, we can see that the next layer, or the layer above that, is the network layer. The network layer is where the data link layer was for the MAC address, and the network layer is for the IP address, and that's where the networking between different networks takes place. So in the network layer, you have something called an IPv4 address, and some IP addresses are reserved. And so, for example, every private IP address starts with 192.168, the entire 192.168. And then the addresses here can all be used. So the last 3 addresses can be used for the private IP address. And usually what you will see is a network mask. So you can see 255.255.225, and then you see here a 0. The first 3 255 just means that this addresses, let's say you live in the city New York. That this represents, okay, you are in New York, and these are all the houses in New York. So this means that 255.255.255, all the 255s go over these octets, and this represents the city. So you cannot change the city, but these can be changed. So it means that from 0 to 255 addresses, because this represents 0 and this goes over this, can be used for your network. So these cannot be changed. Or let's say you have a network at home which is in the 255.255 range. It means that your devices would have an address from 1 to 254. And the reason why 0 cannot be an address is because 0 represents the network, and 255, the last address. So the first address represents the network, and the last address represents the broadcast address. As you can see, the last network, which is 255, is our broadcast network. So this means it's the last address. So every address between 0 and 255 can be used for devices. Also, you can see here a loopback interface, and it says our address here is 127.0.0.1. The 127, and you can see the network mask 255.0.0.0, which means that only this represents the network. So this is like Chicago, and all of these octets can be changed. The 127 network is reserved for the loopback. The loopback basically means a virtual network inside your operating system. So when you have a web server installed on, let's say we have a web server on this system, instead of typing our IP address to go to the web server, we can also just type in the loopback address, which is our own system, so to go to our own website. But if someone else wants to enter your website from in your network, they will have to type in your IP address, followed by the port, which I will explain later what it is, which the server is hosted on. And if it's installed on your own, you can just type in the loopback address, also followed by the port. Default port is 80 and 443. Usually, this is automatically the port your website will go to. So usually, you don't have to type in the port unless it's configured to be hosted on a specific port. In that case, you do have to specify the port. So that is basically what I want to explain from the IP addresses. So if we go further to on Wikipedia, you can see that the port after is the transport layer, the session layer, the presentation layer, and the application layer. And the application layer is where our website will be on, and that's the layer we will be attacking, which is the upper layer for this video series. Okay, so now one more topic I want to explain is I've explained the topic of IP addresses, but the reason why when you go to google.com and you do not enter a IP address is because google.com is a domain name, and a domain name gets translated to an IP address. And the reason this was developed is because it's very difficult to remember IP addresses. So the concept of domain names was invented, so you can type in a domain name, google.com, and it will be automatically translated to the IP addresses in the background. And how it does that is it asks the DNS server. So it asks google.com, your computer will ask the DNS server, which is hosted somewhere on the internet. And the DNS server will respond with the IP address, and your computer will automatically visit the web address. So actually you type in google.com, but you actually go to the IP address and not the domain name. And that's what I wanted to explain about the concept of domain names. And one more thing, if you go here, no, you cannot see it, but another way to view the IP address in Linux is to type IP addr, ADDR, and it will also show you this information.